would you like to comment on what Catholic schools could be doing or could do better in terms of creating safe spaces for all young people?
Right, safe spaces. Safe spaces for all young people is key, and I think, especially these days with the newer approaches, being aware of all these problems like bullying, harassment, I think that probably has improved. Statistically, I don't really know. I know the policies have been put into practice, but I haven't really read anything myself yet that's saying, it has reduced it. But I'm hopeful, like everybody, that it probably has. When it comes to students with the whole sexual identity question, I mean, I think they're extremely vulnerable. We know they're extremely vulnerable, and it's clear that that's across the board. It's not, specific to Catholic schools. Again, it's this whole question in society of the sexual identity and how difficult it is. And even talking earlier about if you're talking to teens about sexuality, and that's assuming heterosexuality as well, that's true, and it's very difficult in many ways then, just growing into knowing one's sexuality and how to live it out. The students with homosexual orientation, I mean, are really having double the difficulty because it has to be in many ways so hidden. And there's, again, this whole, to me it's a kind of fundamental question of, it seems to take so long sometimes to know whether the person is really gay or thinks she's gay for a while as it plays out in terms of identity, because a lot of people experiment or think they're one, they go through different phases. It's a very interesting spectrum, I think, just from that perspective, but to be living as somebody in that spectrum must be extremely difficult. So I think some of the steps that some of the schools have taken with some of the policies they've written for safe schools, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think what some of the Catholic schools have been doing too, and some of their programs in the sort of zero tolerance and having workshops and really educating both staff and students on this, I think is really vital. I mean, every young person, I really don't see that sexual identity as an issue here when we're talking about bullying, or harassment. They're just all against human dignity. We all know that, we say that, we talk that, we try to live that. But I think possibly at that age too, because so many of us are uncertain. Maybe we're sure we're heterosexual, but it's still a difficult time emotionally, and I think we do tend to scapegoat other people and point them out or call them names, all the things that go with that, which as much reflects our own immaturity. Of course, another point that at that age we're not nearly as mature as we think we are. There's an awful lot to learn about sexuality and the whole thing about identity. So I can see that there need to be sort of double the efforts almost to provide a safe environment for students with the homosexual orientation. Here I think that our educators need a hefty dose of awareness raising. We do in society as a whole. I mean, it's not as if these questions about sexual identity come about because we're talking about being Christian or because we're against homosexuals or anything like that. We know there's a huge difference between talking about homosexuality and in the objective way, but once we're talking about people, we really are all equal. I mean, when we're talking about marriage and we say that every man and every woman is created equal in God's image, I mean, this has to be more than just a theory for us. I mean, it has to somehow be part of what we're really trying to do when we're dealing with people, when we're educating people, when we're working with people, etc. And most of us kind of grow into that, but it does take a long time. And I think that the taboos about homosexuality have been so strong across the board, nothing to do with whether you're religious or not, in not just Western society, but universally. You could have an interesting conversation about why that is, but I think we'll just deal with the fact that it still is. And so all our young people are hearing still, no matter how many inroads have been made towards really recognizing that people are equal, there's still a very generally negative feeling, I think, about homosexuality, and not just, again, in the abstract, but towards people who actually are gay themselves and want the world to know that they are. So they really do have a heavy load. Now,
do you see like this a group, I don't know if you want to call them Gay Straight Alliance, but some kind of a group where there's a bit of dialogue
yeah.
on this? Do you think that's helpful in a school setting?
Well, yeah, actually, I do, but because I think any kind of dialogue that's meant to foster more positive or understanding relationships sounds to me like a good thing. But I do reckon, and again, if we're talking about people who are fully mature, who can really see the implications of things like that, that's one thing. I do see the difficulty in high schools that there is an element of branding or, you know, coming out involved, and for the students who are brave enough, and some of them always are, because they just feel they can't live that other way of saying I am something and constantly covering up. I mean, that really, it's hard to imagine just how difficult that must be on a daily basis. It must be extremely difficult, and especially again at that very vulnerable age and stage. But maybe some of the straight, for want of a better word, students who would like to form that part of that alliance, I mean, they need to be pretty brave as well, you know, because other people are going to think that they're gay or whatever. There's going to be name calling and that kind of thing regardless. So I can see the difficulty in you know, having something like that. It still seems to me, and this is just personal opinion really, preferable to have an alliance like that where people can feel they can talk about issues and be understood and be part of the wider community if possible, and feel pretty good about themselves. Because at that age and stage, I think that's just so crucial for everybody. Just because we're talking about still developing, still growing into who we are, still having those adolescent and post-adolescent kind of, you know, questions of identity, and the sexual identity obviously being a major part for all of us, back to that natural law thing, because it is such an important part of who we are. That anything that fosters that, I really wish that could happen. I do, apart from realizing that there are maybe practical problems in having that on school premises because of the attitudes, and not just of other students, but I actually know from you know, speaking to a couple of these groups myself, that it's not everybody even on staff welcomes that kind of group. So again, how do you deal with that? It's back to this education, awareness raising, more workshops. You know, it's a perennial problem. The whole sexuality thing. Every generation has some kind of questions. These teens have yet another layer added to it, and you know, and an awful lot of teachers are obviously people in education in general, but the people directly connected with them in high school are genuinely very concerned, do give of their time, are willing to do things like that. I'd like to think there was some way that could be a more general possibility than not, even with all the possible drawbacks.